So it's been a while. Been a couple months since I posted anything because I haven't really learned anything new until recently. Between yesterday and the day before, I've written, I think, more than 11,000 words. It's just been pouring out of me so fast. And I think I know how I made that happen, and I kind of hate it. I really hope this isn't a rule or a law about creativity. But if it is, I'm going to just have to steel my will and get over it. I have started on a novel. I think since I last spoke, I've hard pivoted. I was working on a completely unrelated project, decided to put that away and write a sequel to my first novel, which I'm shopping around to agents right now and not hearing anything back. And I'm trying to really put out of my mind the fact that I'm writing a sequel to a novel that hasn't been published, right? Because that'll just make me lock up and not do anything. So I'm just writing it. And there are things about this novel that are better than the first one. I've clearly grown as a writer. This first draft, in a lot of ways, is as good and sometimes better than my final draft of my first novel, because I know now how to start and how to make it good, but also because of this other thing that I'm learning. So just a little bit of background. I've been reading this book, Actual Innocence. It's nonfiction. I get all my best inspiration from nonfiction. This is by the folks who started the Innocence Project. They use DNA evidence to exonerate innocent people who have been falsely convicted and thrown in prison for life sentences or sometimes put on death row. It's an eye-opening and heartbreaking and terrifying book. I knew the justice system was not perfect. I had no idea it was so broken. But the main thing I've learned, the thing that I've found really inspiring about this book, is that there's a really interesting cast of characters anytime someone gets falsely convicted, right? It's easy to think about the person who gets falsely convicted. They're sort of the star of the story, the protagonist, you would think. But there's also their family and friends who believe they're innocent and fight for them even after they've been convicted. And it's pretty cool to me that that people have that sort of support. And then there's also the lawyers, right? And the investigators on both sides, the prosecution and the defense. A lot of times, sometimes bending the rules on both sides, trying to get the verdict that they think is right. And so all of that got me thinking, there are a lot of characters with really clear desires. This should be a story, right? And so I'm working on this sequel to my novel. My first novel is about time travel. A husband-wife duo start a time travel company. And so in this one, I was like, what if they use time travel to try to prove the innocence of people who are falsely accused, right? Where there is no DNA evidence, right? In a crime like arson, could you go back in time and prove someone is innocent? I thought that was interesting. And so I was having trouble. I was thinking and trying to, I was having trouble getting it together. I think someone's going to approach them with this idea and they're going to do it. So this family, very convinced that their family member is innocent, comes to the protagonist and her husband and says, can you go back in time and prove that he's innocent? And they say, yeah. And I was writing this and it was just like, it wasn't working for me. And so then I was like, what if the protagonist's husband is the one who's falsely accused and she's going back in time? I started writing that and it wasn't working. It wasn't doing a thing for me. Even though I was very excited about this idea, I just couldn't get it to come together. And so 2 failed starts. The second one didn't even make it to half a page before I just knew it was wrong. And so I sat back and thought, well, I know from this book, there's this cast of characters. Who am I forgetting? And I realized maybe the most interesting character in a story like this is the eyewitnesses, right? And sometimes the victims. They are convinced that this is the person who committed the crime. They saw it with their own eyes. They may have experienced in their own body the crime. And they are certain that this is the guy who did it. It's usually a guy. And then they go to jail. The guy goes to jail, and these people come and want to get him out of the jail. This criminal who did these horrible things, they want to let him out. What are they thinking? I don't care what the DNA says. I know he's the one who did it. And what a thing, right? Like, I think I've talked about how I think the untrustworthiness of memory is interesting anyway. And so to have that be the story, I'm convinced this guy is guilty, and there are these people who are trying to let him out of jail. I must stop them, right? And so that was the idea that I wanted to run with, and it gave me 11,000 words in 2 days. And so the thing that I'm worried is a law or a rule of creativity, at least for me, Kyle, aspiring novelist, is I've got to write something that doesn't work and then analyze why it doesn't work before I can write something that does work. I think that's why my second novel is better than my first novel, because I learned from a lot of mistakes. I think that's why my third attempt at this story is 11,000 words so far, whereas the first couple of attempts probably never broke 1,000. Maybe combined, I think you've got to do bad work before you can do good work. I think you've got to do the wrong thing before you know what the right thing is, at least in the world of creativity. So I don't like that, because when I write, I want to just sit down and have it pouring out of me like I have been. I want to have an idea and I want to pursue it and I want it to work every time. But I think that's just not in the cards. I think I have to sit down and write. And when it doesn't work, analyze why and try again. And when that doesn't work, try again. And I don't know at what point you abandon an idea is just never going to work. That's the really scary part, right? Maybe on the 4th or 5th revision, it would be gold and you give up at revision number 3 or attempt number 3. But I think there's something here, and it got me 11,000 words so far. So now I've finished that part of the story, and there's this other part of the story. This is sort of Act 2. Act 1, there's this other stuff happening, and I need to sit down and force myself to write it, but I don't have an idea I'm in love with for how to make it work. And I just know I'm going to sit down and write garbage, and I hate writing garbage. But I think I've got to force myself to believe that the garbage is a means to an end. Well, perfect. and that it's going to be worth it. So I'm going to try to do some bad writing and hope that it leads to good writing, while I wait to hear back from agents about my first book, which maybe I need to revise again. But I'm so sick of revising that book. Anyway, those are my thoughts for you today. Hopefully you'll see more videos coming from me more frequently now, as I am off and running once again.